Well, a lot of people know me by my English name, um, Stephen Han. A lot of people actually don't know my Korean name, which is Han Kyung Gun. I've just been thinking a lot about my Korean name lately. I would say that I am still very much an elementary Korean speaker. Um, I barely know the basics of Korean. I have a terrible accent when I Americanized accent when I talk in Korean. Um, I can read only if I read very slowly. I can barely write. Um, it's funny because every time I try to write phonetically in Korean and translate it in my head and onto text or onto message, whether it be to my mom or my dad, my mom and dad will always correct me if they see something that's wrong, and usually 95% of the time it's always wrong. But yeah, so I've been stuck at an elementary level of Korean for since the fourth grade. Um, yeah, I used to go to church, and growing up in church, going to a predominantly Korean church, they trained us in Korean. They had the option of going to basically like a Sunday school where they would just teach you Korean, teach you all the basics. It was tough feeling like learning Korean was important at the time because I went to a school where all we spoke every single day was English, so I figured what was the point of learning Korean? Every single Sunday, I was already worried about school and classes. I think it was around the fourth grade that my sister and we begged our parents to just let us study Korean at home. Um, and my parents eventually agreed, but only on the condition that study we would study Korean at home. And they actually bought us books and CDs and all these like worksheets and workbooks. Um, but I think we were a little mischievous that way, and we ended up never actually studying Korean at home, much to my parents' dismay. So yeah, that's where I kind of just stopped. And yeah, like it's funny because my mom specifically told me like you would regret it one day, not sticking through Korean, and not just sticking it through and powering through and continuing to learn it as much as you could. And me being a dumb kid said to her, like, um, like I'm not going to regret it. Like I don't need Korean in my life. I don't need Korean. Like I only speak it at home, so what's the point? And I was very obstinate and I was very tough about that. And I don't know, looking back, not knowing Korean, and more than that, not being able to communicate with my parents, not being able to communicate with my extended family, not being able to communicate with my grandma, who's my only grandparent that's left. Just, yeah, I feel like there's this whole other world inside of me that I just know nothing about. Um, and that's not just to do with not knowing Korean, I think. I don't know. Um, like, yeah, and at this point, I think I'm at a place where I feel more attached to the label Asian American than I do Korean American. Um, which I know sounds contrived or strange, but it's, I don't know. It's like I feel like I have no claim to Koreanness given the way I grew up, um, given my inability to speak Korean fluently or read or write it. Um, Like, for example, like, I've never even been to Korea yet. It's been tough, I think, trying to feel in tune with my Korean identity. What about me makes me Korean, or what does it mean to be authentically Korean? And I think in a lot of ways, the questions that are kind of echoing in my head nonstop have made me more mindful in general. Just kind of like the scope of experiences with across the Asian American and Asian community globally, not just in America. Um, it's, I don't know, it's been an interesting journey trying to figure out my Korean self, my Asian self. Um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.